In yesterday's video, I was talking about the Declaration of Independence and our unalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, as well as the phrase from the preamble to the Constitution about providing for the general welfare as a function of government. And that got me thinking, so what is happiness? And is it the pursuit or the happiness that we have a right to? In this video, I'm going to describe 5 components of happiness. Hello, I'm Larry Meisel, and welcome to Confidence on Camera. My 6th day of my 30-day challenge to practice talking to the camera so I can develop the confidence and the comfortability having a conversation with the camera and you, the viewers behind it. My goal for this is to support the development of my main channel, The Examined Life, which I will describe at the end of this video. So, looking for the components of happiness: adversity, being able to handle adversity, and being able to find what's referred to as authentic happiness. And another term that's important is called eudaimonic happiness. That's difficult to say. I'll spell it for you. eudaimonic. Eudaimonic happiness. Meaning and purpose. The 4th goal, meaning and purpose. And the 5th component is to question whether or not money can buy happiness. The first 2 components are related to the work of a psychologist named Martin Seligman. Handling adversity, in his work, he identified the learned helplessness principle, which is in most of the freshman college survey books on psychology. Learned helplessness, what he found was that if he put animals in a condition in which they received an electric shock, half of the animals could escape the shock if they moved from one side of the box to the other. For the other half of the animals, they received a shock and it was random. They couldn't tell when the next one was coming, and there was nothing they could do to escape it. So in the first condition, the animals learned to just move to the other side of the box where they never got shocked. Then for the second condition, they reversed the stimulus so that the animals could learn to escape the shock if they'd move to the other side of the box. But because of the initial experience of not being able to predict or control the shock, they gave up trying. And he termed this learned helplessness. There was nothing they could do, and they just learned to be apathetic and stop trying. He was presenting the results of his research at one point, and a guy came up to him at the end of the presentation and told him that he had missed the point. So he was baffled, and he said, well, my experiments are in all the college textbooks, and what do you mean I'm famous? What do you mean I missed the point? And the guy said to him, no, 2/3 of your subjects became helpless, so statistically you confirmed your hypothesis. But 1/3 of the subjects did not become helpless. Those are the subjects that you need to study. So he went off on a different direction in his career, and he started to study optimism. and he's written a book called Learned Optimism. And the main takeaway from the book is that people who can handle adversity are able to remain optimistic by telling themselves either one, two, or three things. The first is, it's not personal. The second is, it's not permanent. And the third, it won't ruin everything. Now, it's not personal in two respects. One is that it's not personal, woe is me, why is this happening to me, how come? It's not personal. It happens to lots of people, and it's not just me. And it's not personal in that the people are not out to get me. They're not doing it to just get back at me or to hurt me, harm me. And the second is it won't last forever. Things will change. Persistence and perseverance. I can overcome this eventually. And the last is, and it won't ruin everything. Even if something does happen where, like for instance, I have chronic pain that won't go away, there are still other things that I can do to have an enriching and meaningful life. So there's a little exercise that I sometimes suggest to people, which is when you start feeling helpless and having a woe is me, why is everything happening to me? This is going to last forever, or the dominoes are going to fall and I'm going to wind up, penniless in the park with a tinfoil hat. Get a piece of paper and divide it into 3 columns. And in the first column, you write on the top, it's not personal. Second column, it's not permanent. Third column, it won't ruin everything. And then you write that down like the old time tasks that they used to give you for punishment in grammar school. You just write a column of sentences that say, it's not personal, it's not personal, it's not personal, all the way down the page. And then you fill up the second column. It's not permanent, it's not permanent, it's not permanent. Third column. It won't ruin everything, it won't ruin everything. All the way down. When you get the page filled, you turn the page over and you write down all the reasons you can think of about why those 3 things are true. So you can change your focus, change your beliefs to have an optimistic attitude toward the condition. That it's not just happening to you and they're not out to get you. And it won't last forever. And it won't ruin everything. Then he went from studying learned optimism to studying happiness. He was the president of the American Psychological Association back in the 1980s. And he had an initiative to start studying happiness. He said that the history of psychology and psychotherapy was helping people to take their lives from a -5 to a -2 or -3. And he said, we ought to be able to do better than that. We ought to be able to be helping people take their lives from a negative something to a positive something. And in studying that, what he found was that Westerners, particularly Americans, think of happiness as wealth and leisure. If I had a lot of money and I could be on permanent vacation, boy, that would be the life. Just let me win the lottery. I could be happy. What he identified was that wealth and leisure are good mood modifiers, and they're important and they're helpful, but they're temporary. They don't last. We've all probably had the experience of being able to go on vacation, and for the first couple days, this is great. I could live like this. And then after you're there for 3, 4 days, it gets to be routine and you start thinking about wanting to be back at home and go back to work and do something useful. So authentic happiness, he described or identified. Authentic happiness is being able to identify what you're good at, your personal signature strengths, and then find ways to apply those strengths to your personal life, your family life, your community life, your work and professional life, and your spiritual life. And those things combine to give you long-lasting, authentic happiness. He uses himself as an example, and he says that his personal strength is understanding and experimenting to try to understand how things work. He's a research psychologist, and he says running experiments and analyzing data, when he's in the lab doing experiments, he can just lose track of time. But because he's a famous professor at a big university, he gets put on a lot of committees. And he said, that's something. He's a competent committee chairman. He says, I can do it. I can organize a meeting. But the entire time I'm doing it, I'm looking at the clock waiting for it to be over. But like I say, boy, when he's in the lab, he can just get totally immersed in what he's doing and forget about time and enjoy himself and make real significant contributions. Now, the third and the fourth conditions are overlap. And eudaimonic happiness is something I learned about from one of those MOOCs, M-O-O-C, multiple online open courses. And the course that I took was called The Science of Happiness. And in that course, I learned to add the concept of struggle. That happiness also comes from struggle and effort and commitment to a worthwhile cause. That having things come easy and naturally undermine happiness. That we seem to want and need to have something to work hard for. You probably remember your parents telling you when you were growing up that you value things more when you have to work to earn them. So that's another component of happiness. And it overlaps with the idea of meaning and purpose. There's a book written by a guy named Viktor Frankel, who was a survivor of the Holocaust. He wrote the book Man's Search for Meaning. And it's a memoir of his time in the concentration camps, where he observed that there were some people who were either not as sick, they were still ambulatory, they were still healthy enough to be walking around. But they would get a 1,000-meter stare, and they would walk like across the boundary where they knew that they would be shot, or they would grab onto the electrified fence and essentially commit suicide. Or there were people who were in hospital, but there were other people in the hospital sicker than they were. But the less sick people died before the more sick people. And he began to wonder about it. Why did people who were closer to death survive, and people who were less well off or who were better off succumbed. And the conclusion he came to was that the people who died sort of prematurely, he said their suffering didn't have any meaning. So the book Man's Search for Meaning is in essence that we need to have purpose and meaning to our lives in order to thrive, in order to survive, in order to thrive. And there's also another book by a rabbi named Harold Kushner, who wrote, When Everything You Always Wanted Isn't Enough. And he describes in the book that he was working for a congregation that was very financially comfortable. Not exorbitantly wealthy, but not poor and struggling. And he said his office was always full of people coming in to complain about not feeling well, feeling depressed, lethargic, anxious. And he said that what they all seemed to have in common was they had everything they always wanted, but it wasn't enough because they didn't feel themselves to be connected to anything more meaningful or more important than themselves. The physical comforts and the financial security wasn't contributing to anything more meaningful than just itself. So, handling adversity, learning to be optimistic, and finding authentic happiness, applying your signature strengths to your personal, family, community, professional, spiritual life is more satisfying and leads to being more happy than people who have wealth and leisure. Having a commitment and working hard and effort to something more important, significantly meaningful and purposeful outside of just yourself. And then there's the question of, can money buy happiness? You know, there's a song about it, money can't buy happiness. The best things in life are free. Which, by the way, I saw a t-shirt recently had a cartoon of a golden retriever sitting, doing his happy, smiley, dopey golden retriever look. And the caption underneath him said, the best things in life are not things. And although money can buy happiness, research does confirm that money can make people happier. But there's a limit to it. If you go from poverty to middle class, you're happier. But then beyond that, there's diminishing returns. And the comfort and security of too much money can ironically lead to losing happiness. If you go from making $20,000 a year to making $70,000, $80,000 a year, yeah, you're happier. But if you go from making $80,000 a year to making $80 million a year, it doesn't help that much. So, if you've gotten this far, you know the drill. Like, comment, share, and subscribe. Let me know in the comments your thoughts about this topic. And let me know in the comments your suggestions for how I can improve my presentation on camera. Because the purpose of Confidence on Camera is to contribute to the success of my main channel, which is called The Examined Life. And that's a channel for people interested in the discussion of ideas and issues from the tremendously important to the trivial but interesting, in civil discussion. And the goal of the channel is to become monetized and then donate 90% of the proceeds to Doctors Without Borders, Amnesty International, Feeding America, and Oxfam, which is a World Hunger and Poverty Relief NGO. So you can check out my main channel. I'll put a link in the description below. And like, comment, and share, and subscribe. Just by watching, you'll be helping me to help others. So this is day 6 of the 30-day Talk to Camera Challenge. Come on back tomorrow for day 7. Oh, and in the comments, give me your ideas and suggestions about what topics you would like to hear me discuss. Let's have a conversation. Thanks for watching.